Senate File 535 is just that. It's an early voting bill, and the main reason that I feel strongly that this is good public policy for Minnesota to adopt is that many Minnesotans erroneously believe right now that we have early voting in Minnesota. I think it has been proven through the thousands of people who are now voting by absentee ballot, either in person or with an absentee ballot, that they would like the convenience and the convenience of being able to vote prior to the traditional election day. And so this bill requires early voting to be available at all primary, general, and special elections for federal, state, or county office. In the bill as proposed before you today, the early voting period would start 15 days prior to the election and run through 5 o'clock on the third day before Election Day.
The official year for the state of Minnesota commences on the first Monday in January in each year, and all terms of office terminate at that time. This is the important bit. The general election shall be held on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November in each even-numbered year. Shall be held on the first Tuesday. We simply cannot conduct general election voting prior to or after the constitutionally designated election day. The Constitution doesn't permit elections to be held for weeks. They take place on one day, the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November in an even-numbered year. Even if the bill were constitutional, which it most certainly is not, the proposal is a threat to the integrity of our already weak election system. We simply cannot have every single election convenience to make voting easier, and at the same time have none of the features that other states employ to make cheating harder. Unless our objective, of course, is to be governed by the candidates and parties who cheat the best. Some states have early voting, some have no excuse absentee voting, some have election day registration, some use vouching, some vote by mail. No state combines all of these features, as well as having no identification requirement. All this bill accomplishes is to make the window for fraud exponentially wider, while casting aside the meager protections that we do have in place in the form of citizen oversight and partisan poll challengers. How can we possibly expect to staff polling locations for weeks on end with partisan poll observers when we can't, the parties have a hard enough time getting enough volunteers out on one day to accomplish that? So citizen oversight, partisan oversight goes out the window if we employ early voting. I don't believe there's any way to make this bill workable, and I will urge the members of the committee to vote against this serious threat to the integrity of our election system.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Fraser.
And members, Beth Fraser from the Office of the Secretary of State. And I don't believe that this changes Election Day. Election Day is the day on which the ballots are counted. And in the early voting bill, the ballots are not counted before the polls close at 8 p.m. on Election Day. The same is true with absentee ballots currently cast. They are not counted until the polls close. So Election Day is the day on which the ballots are counted.
Thank you. Senator Kiffmeyer.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just disagree. I think there is a major difference between early voting and absentee voting. In absentee voting, the ballot is marked and then held until Election Day when it is counted. On an early vote, it is actually processed and the part of counting is begun because it's put into a ballot box in that process, and those votes are actually counted. They're in that process. On Election Day, in an absentee ballot, you're able to supersede that by coming in on Election Day and casting an absentee and cast a ballot in person. Or even in some cases where there have been issues, you're able to supersede a previous absentee ballot. An early vote, that is not the case. It is cast, it is counted, and I think this is a very important question that has constitutional bearing and should be researched further, because there is a big difference between the casting and the actual counting And the fact that on election night you actually do the reporting of those ballots, but those are issues that I think are very distinct.
Senator Rest, did you?
Mr. Chair and
Ms. Fraser.
Senator Kiffmeyer and members, the law was actually changed in 2010 so that absentee ballots are processed, the envelopes are opened, and the ballots are put into the machine at any time after 5 p.m. on Friday before the election. And so at that point, there is no superseding your absentee ballot. The ballot is final, it is put into the machine, but the ballots are not counted. We do not know who has more votes until 8 p.m. on election night when the ballots are counted, when the machine totals the votes. Just like we don't know throughout the day at noon, we may know 10 people have voted, but we don't know how they voted. We don't know until 8 p.m. Similarly, ballots are fed into the machines from 5 p.m. on Friday onward. People cannot cast another ballot, but we do not know how they voted because their votes are not counted until the polls close.
Well, Mr. Chair, then it makes the question
Senator
about
Kiffmeyer.
that law as well. I don't think it changes the constitutional question or the distinction that we're talking about. There are a lot of things that are on statute that sometimes come to light in that regard, but it's the fruit of the tree, you might say. But I think the point still stands.